Bruce and Jack back here answering your questions in the mailbag, but I'd like to pose a question for Bruce. How's Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty going?
So 1964, President Johnson started the war on poverty.
Yes.
And it wiped out all poverty, and we've had no poverty ever since.
Excellent. Thank you. Oh, are we done?
No, that's not exactly. That's the way it was supposed to happen.
Oh.
So let's go back before.
Dead before my time, right?
Yeah, let's go back before Lyndon Johnson. So for 185 years or so, and even before the founding of our country, we had increased productivity, better living conditions, improving economics, and really radical improvements from the 30s to 40s to 50s to 60s. Huge improvements and more equalization of wages,
civil rights movement.
Employment situation improving, and so on. And then in 1964, President Lyndon Johnson, who maybe he didn't have enough wars with the Vietnam debacle and bombing Cambodia or whatever, wanted to have another war, the war on poverty. Sounds great. So he started all of these authoritarian social programs, which people, it's amazing. To this day, people say, what a great thing. That's what America should do. People still use these as an example of saying how great America can be. These social programs that we did, that really was great. No, they weren't, because the poverty rates stopped. When at the point that Lyndon Johnson gave that speech in '64, we have not reduced any poverty. In terms of percentage, the people under the poverty line, 12%, it depends on how you measure it. 12% of people poverty line then, 12% of people poverty line now. Again, depends measurement, but either way, consistent measurement from '64 to now, it has done nothing to reduce poverty. It's cost $15 trillion. You know how much $15 trillion is?
You could buy a lot of.
I know how much it is because I know how much. I did this calculation. I don't know this in my head, but I did the calculation for the national debt, which is close. It's 17 trillion. What's a couple trillion here and there? 15 trillion is, if you spend $1 million a minute, 60 minutes an hour, every hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it'd take 45 years to spend 17 trillion. So
that's a lot of salmon salads you could buy for the impoverished.
Yeah. So $15 trillion we spent on this war on poverty, and it has not worked. Now, you would think that, number one, people would stop pointing to this as some kind of success about how great America is because we do these ridiculous failed social programs. And it's mainly because of the name. The name sounds good. If they called it the take money from people who work and give it to special interests and further a broken system which creates more poverty, well, then it wouldn't be so popular. But same thing with war on drugs. The war on drugs creates more drugs. Yeah. You know why crack exists? Because of the war on drugs. Because crack would have never been invented, neither would have meth, if it wasn't because they wanted something more powerful, more addictive, more easy to transport. So rather than carrying around bags of expensive cocaine, they tried to distill it down to something cheaper, easier to transport, and that's why you have crack. And the potency of marijuana has gone through the roof. All of these things because of the war on drugs. So the war on drugs has created more drug use. It's also created a supply and demand situation. 50% of the violent crime in America is done by gangs. Without drug revenue, the gangs would be a tiny, tiny fraction of that. So the war on drugs creates exactly the opposite effect. What are the wars if we had? War on drugs, war on poverty, the war on terror.
Yeah, the war on terror. Yeah,
which is an emotion. You can't declare war on an emotion.
Yeah, because...
And it makes it very convenient because you have these things where they can just keep going and going and going. We have the war on poverty. It never ends. If you said this is a war on Iraq, well, that would not have made sense because we were supposedly going to help Iraq. So that they wouldn't have done that. But if you said it's a war on Al-Qaeda, well, then you would...
It was Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Right. So we're freeing people by killing them and bombing them. Not real sensible. But if you had a war on Al-Qaeda, then you would identify, okay, how do we win? Who's in charge? What's the leadership? That would make more sense. War on the Taliban. But we don't do that. We like to have these big open-ended generic terms like war on terror, which creates more terrorists. Because it's been reported that something like 30 or more people who are innocent are killed for every terrorist that we kill. So if you kill somebody's family and they're, that mild-mannered accountant or whatever, he's going to become a terrorist. So it's a terrorist creation factory. Every time you drop a bomb and kill 100 people, that's 200, 300, 400 family members who, maybe they didn't mind the United States before, now they become terrorists. So what else we have? War on drugs, war on poverty. It's not really, they haven't really called it a war on healthcare companies, or you could say Wall Street too, but same kind of sentiment.
Right. It's
a lot of these people are like, let's get those terrible healthcare companies. Michael Moore talked about all the evil healthcare companies. Well, have you seen the stocks since they passed the Affordable Care Act? All through the roof.
Yep.
We say that, these, Michael Moore's movie Sicko basically complains about all these companies. We gave them a bunch of money. You have people like Senator Warren complain about Wall Street and then give them billions and billions of dollars of our money. So the war on Wall Street ends up making Wall Street richer. The war on healthcare companies makes it, so that's the problem. And anybody who's been to a DMV or dealt with government in any way, it shouldn't surprise them that government is not only incompetent at these things, but they do exactly the opposite of what they could do. We now see it in all kinds of areas whenever they try and do something. Look at Chicago, another example. They're going to have a war on guns and a war on violence. They end up with more violence and more gun problems than anywhere else because people can't protect themselves.